Okay, so we're going to have a look at another part of the C1 Advanced Use of English exam. We're looking here specifically at part two, open close. Okay, someone made a comment if I could make a video just explaining a little bit about this part of the exam. So we're going to go through some sort of key points for the open close part of this exam. Okay, now I'm going to look at some words in particular and then sort of talk about some general items at the end. Specifically, we're going to have a look at this first question here. We've got a couple of sentences that are taken from part two, and we know that we have to write only one word in each of the spaces. Okay, so for example, here, I've a nurse for almost 30 years, and I've pretty much seen everything. So just looking very quickly with the form of have here and the space, we can probably say, well, this is going to be a past participle. And I would imagine I've been a nurse would sort of fit here as a possible answer. Okay. Now, what I'm going to look at specifically now for a couple of minutes is what's going to happen here in exercise number 9. Okay. So again, we have a space here. We've got something, you may be part of the happiest time of someone's life on one day, comma, the next day you're helping patients through very tough experiences. Okay. Now, the answers for the possible answers here for number 9 could well be these here. Okay. Although, while, or whilst. Okay. And essentially what we've got here within the sentence is a contrast. Okay. We've got two clauses separated by the comma. Okay. And the contrast is happiest, in this case, time of someone's life, and very tough experiences. Okay. Now, what word can we use that would join two clauses together that are contrasted? Well, we can definitely use these words here. Okay. So it says here, although it's used to refer, all is used to refer to a contrast in a sentence, and we can see that happy and tough contrast the two. Okay. Now, although we'll introduce what they call subordinate clauses. Okay. Subordinate clauses are basically clauses that cannot stand by themselves because they don't really have sense. Okay. They have to be joined with a main clause, which is what we have here afterwards. Okay. So examples of subordinate clauses, for example, here, if you win the award, since the sun will shine today. Well, if you win the award, what? There's nothing really that sort of can sort of give you meaning to that. You need another sort of clause that say, if you win the award, I will be very happy. Okay, and that will give you a sense of what the sentence is about. Okay, since the sun will shine today, again, it doesn't really have meaning on itself, but we could add, since the sun will shine today, we will go to the beach. Okay, so these are examples of subordinate clauses. Okay. Now we've got another example here of similar sorts of answers. Okay. Again, in number 9, we could also use the word here, although, or while, or whilst. Okay. Now this is a little bit more complicated to look at because you need to sort of know what the answer here is for 10 in order for you to see the sort of contrast. Okay. But the contrast being here, temporary structures and structures that are sort of permanent. And because of the answer here with end up, you can see here the phrasal verb end up gives you this idea of to be in a particular place or situation finally. Okay, so you've got this sort of idea of something which is temporary and something which is permanent. Okay, and again, although and though, while and whilst, you have to be careful with while and whilst that it doesn't refer to the meaning of at the same time. Okay, because that could also be used with that sort of meaning. While and whilst here are used in the same sort of idea as although or though. Okay, so although definitely fits in here. Okay, we have another sort of subordinate clause which requires further information. Okay, to sort of make it stand alone, together as a whole sentence. Okay, we've got the phrasal verb with end up. Okay, that would definitely give us this contrast between the two. Okay, and then in number 11, we've got the structure here, highly thought of. Okay, and to think of someone, and especially highly think of them, you got this idea of to admire or to appreciate. Okay, right. Okay, now there are other sort of words that we could use, but slightly differently, but they have the same sort of use of contrasting ideas, and they are despite and in spite of. Okay, and you can see here, we've got sentences here with although, or perhaps even though. Even though is a slightly stronger meaning than although, okay, but it works pretty much in the same sort of way. And we can see here the differences with despite and in spite of. Now, the only difference is here, if you look at the sentences and how they're structured with despite and in spite of, you notice that we would have to use them with either gerunds, for example, here being, or just with nouns. Okay, they will not go with, for example, here subordinate clauses, which we have with although or even though. Okay. Now, some other pages that I've been looking at that are quite interesting is from this page here, and this page here from CAE Tips. Okay, they put together, or the guy that runs a page, is really quite a good page. You can check it out. He put together common answers for open close. Okay, and you can see here the percentages involved. Prepositions coming right at the top. Okay, prepositions could be in sort of phrasal verbs. It could be with adjectives. There's lots of different sort of uses for prepositions, and they are essentially a third of the answers. Okay, then you can see here that there's some other important sort of words here to use. Pronouns, 16%. Okay, adverbs. Now, adverbs is quite a wide sort of area. And if you sort of go down to here, you can see all the different sort of possible adverbs that you could use. Okay, there are lots. Okay, if you're not too sure of how many different kinds of adverbs there are and what they might be, then check out this web page from Cambridge, and it sort of goes through all the different kinds of adverbs that you might need to use. Okay, we can also see as well that verbs in general are quite common. Okay, and verbs in general here being of these kinds, for example, take or make or put. Lots of, I mean, there are quite a few in the sort of idea of sort of general sort of phrasal verbs that might come up. Okay, they're not going to be sort of highly descriptive verbs. Okay, but they will be perhaps common phrasal verbs. Okay, so you definitely need to be aware of those. Okay, you can also see that forms of the verb to be and modal verbs are going to be important. Okay, so modal verbs, you know, you can have all these different forms of, you can see there's different forms of the verb to be, different forms of the verb have. All of these are sort of very common to use as well. Okay, and like we spoke at the beginning with these sort of linking expressions, again, you can see here, it comes up quite a lot. And you can see here all the different possible, again, we talked about these contrast links in spite of, despite, though, even though, but all the other possible links that could be used for other such things, conditional links, because we know conditionals are quite important. If you want to add extra information, the reasons for doing something, the purposes for doing something, you can see here that all these would be also possible. Okay, so have a quick look through, check out these web pages and have a look. Again, like pretty much the rest of the exam, it is a lot of practice. Okay, and the more knowledge that you have of these kinds of things, the easier this will be. I know that part 2 is not an easy part, but it is just a question of doing a little bit of work. Okay.